You know that moment when everything around you feels loud, chaotic, like the world is shouting expectations, pressure, urgent decisions, but inside, there's just this strange, almost uncomfortable silence. It's like standing in the middle of a crowd and still feeling completely alone, like everyone else has a plan, a direction, a sense of certainty, and you're just frozen in time, trying to make sense of it all. Sometimes it's a subtle emptiness, and other times it's a tightness in your chest that you can't quite explain. And even though it might seem small, that silent state can actually be a hidden cry for help, a sign that you need to pause and really listen to yourself without rushing, without distractions. Because if we don't take the time to understand what's happening inside, everything outside starts to lose its meaning. Even if on the surface, everything seems just fine. It's hard to explain this feeling. It's like life keeps going normally for everyone else, but something inside of you feels out of place, as if you're wearing clothes that don't quite fit or walking down paths you never truly chose. And the strangest part is, even when everything seems to be working, your job, your studies, your routine, social media, there's still this lingering sense of disconnection, as if something invisible is missing from it all. You try to convince yourself it's just a phase, just exhaustion, but deep down, you know it's deeper than that, because something inside you is asking for attention, asking for room to breathe. And that doesn't mean you're doing something wrong, and definitely not that you're broken. Sometimes it just means you've stopped listening to yourself, and now, your body, your soul, they're gently trying to call you back home. Today I want to talk to you about something that for many people seems distant or even complicated, mental clarity. But the truth is, it has nothing to do with secret formulas or complex techniques. Mental clarity isn't some superpower reserved for people who meditate on mountaintops or live a perfectly zen life. It's a real, accessible possibility that starts with one simple decision: the choice to look inward. Because at the end of the day, clarity isn't about knowing everything. It's about seeing more honestly what you already feel, what you're already living. It's that moment when the pieces of your inner puzzle begin to line up, and suddenly you understand the weight behind certain silences or emotions. It's not about eliminating the chaos outside, but about finding a place of calm inside, a space where you can breathe without needing to run away from yourself. Because look, we're surrounded by noise all the time. Noise from the outside, social media, family pressure, society's unrealistic expectations, and also that inner noise filled with doubts, comparisons, and fears we rarely share with anyone. And in the middle of all that noise, all those distractions and demands, it's easy to get lost. Easy to forget what really matters, what's true, what's actually aligned with who you are deep down. We start living on autopilot, just reacting, just trying to keep up with everyone else's pace. And without even noticing, we begin to drift away from ourselves. We start shaping our lives around everyone's expectations, except our own. It's like trying to squeeze into clothes made for someone else. And then, when we finally stop, we realize that the silence we've been afraid of might actually be an invitation to come back to ourselves. I've been through moments like that, moments when my mind felt like a dark room, filled with scattered things, where I couldn't find anything, not even myself. It was like trying to walk through a mess, constantly tripping over my own thoughts, not knowing where to even begin cleaning up. A heavy feeling, you know, as if I were carrying a load full of things that weren't even mine, but I took them on out of fear. Fear of letting people down, fear of stopping, fear of being seen as weak. And that's the point where so many people give up, when the confusion becomes routine and emotional exhaustion starts to feel normal. But it's not. And it took me a while to understand that. It took me a while to see that my mind was crying for help, not because I was incapable, but because I had forgotten to care for my inner space, for myself. And the strangest part of all this is that the more I tried to solve my mental chaos by chasing external solutions, the more lost I felt. I downloaded productivity apps, read self-help books, made endless to-do lists, all in an attempt to bring some kind of order to my mind. But at the end of the day, even after checking off tasks and filling up my schedule, that feeling of emptiness was still there, steady, quiet, waiting for me in the silence of the night. And that silence was exactly what I kept avoiding. I thought I needed more stimulation, more activity, more distraction. But the more I tried to fill that space with things, the louder it cried for attention. It was as if my mind was trying to show me that the mess wasn't meant to be solved by rushing, but welcomed with patience, because not every confusion needs urgency. Sometimes all it needs is to be heard. It was only when I stopped running and simply chose to listen to myself that I began to truly understand what was going on inside me. And honestly, it wasn't easy. Silence is scary at first. It feels empty, even threatening, like walking into a dark room without knowing what you'll find. But over time, I began to realize that silence was exactly what I needed, because that's where the truth lives. It was in the silence that I started to notice what was truly mine and what I had been carrying for others. It was there that I understood clarity doesn't come from a desperate effort to figure everything out. It comes from the gentle act of allowing yourself to feel. Clarity is born when we stop fighting with what's inside us and begin to have a calm, honest conversation with it. No pressure, no fear, just presence and truth. It might sound too simple to say the answer lies in silence, but the truth is, we're often afraid to stop because deep down we know we'll come face to face with things we've kept hidden for a long time. Things we've avoided dealing with, unresolved hurts, forgotten dreams, postponed decisions. And when we meet that silence, filled with all the emotions we've buried, our instinct is to run, to look for any noise that might distract us. But running doesn't fix it, it only delays it. And everything we push away for later always comes back. Sometimes it returns as anxiety, sometimes as unexplained sadness, or that vague sense that something just isn't right. The silence, in truth, is not an enemy. It's a mirror that only reveals itself when we're brave enough to sit with ourselves. And in that reflection, as uncomfortable as it may be, lives the path to freedom. Self-knowledge is exactly that, the courage to face yourself without rushing, without masks, and without trying to skip steps. It's not about becoming perfect, enlightened, or immune to problems. It's about learning to live with everything you are, even the parts you still don't fully understand. It means accepting that feeling pain is part of the journey, that having bad days doesn't define you, and that changing your mind can be a sign of growth, not weakness. It's about looking inward with more curiosity than judgment, because when you start observing yourself with kindness, you realize that many of the things you thought were flaws were actually forms of protection, just ways you found to stay standing during hard times. And that's beautiful. That's human. Self-knowledge isn't about fixing anything. It's about knowing yourself so deeply that finally, life starts to feel a little lighter and more yours. And maybe right now you're asking yourself, okay, I get it, but how do I actually start doing this in real life? And I get that question because we've been conditioned to believe that inner change needs big plans, complex methods, or some secret formula that only other people seem to know. But the truth is, it all starts with small gestures of awareness. It starts when you choose to observe yourself. Notice how you react when someone criticizes you, how you feel when you're alone, what irritates you more than it should, what moves you unexpectedly. Because those moments say more about you than any personality test. They are clues, internal maps that, if you take them seriously, can show you where the knots are that need to be untied. And you don't have to understand everything all at once. You just have to start looking, and look with kindness, not pressure. The other day, for example, I got irritated by someone who was speaking way too loudly. They weren't even talking to me, but it really bothered me. My first reaction was to judge them. I thought they were being rude, ruining my peaceful moment. But later, when I was alone, I decided to reflect more calmly on what that situation was actually revealing about me. And then it hit me. The discomfort wasn't just about the noise. It was about how much I had been silencing myself in my own relationships. I wasn't allowing myself to be heard. I avoided tough conversations, swallowed my opinions, held back from speaking up just to keep things peaceful. That person unknowingly had shown me something I didn't want to see. Sometimes what irritates us most in others is exactly what's screaming inside us, waiting to be seen. And when we finally see it, something shifts. It felt like a light had turned on inside me. And it wasn't a bright light, not the kind that blinds you. It was soft, quiet, like the flame of a candle that gently illuminates just enough for you to see what's right in front of you. And that's how clarity often arrives, not with noise or grand moments, but through small flashes of insight, in a random thought during a shower, in a sincere conversation with someone you trust, or even in a silent moment when you accidentally end up truly listening to yourself. These moments can't be scheduled. They simply happen when you make space for them. when you stop filling every part of your day with distractions and begin creating small pockets for presence. Because clarity doesn't scream, it whispers, and it can only be heard by those who are willing to listen, even if just for a few honest seconds. Sometimes we don't need a manual or ready-made answers. What we really need is space, inner space, a quiet corner inside ourselves where there's no pressure, no rush, and no need to impress anyone. That space begins to appear when we stop trying to fix everything and start simply embracing ourselves. When we accept that not having all the answers isn't failure, it's part of being human, and it's within that space that something powerful is born. Presence. The kind of presence that doesn't judge, that just observes, the kind that listens without urgency, that allows us to feel without guilt. Creating this space doesn't require anything external. Sometimes all you need is to close your eyes for a few seconds and remember, you have permission to exist exactly as you are right now. That space is yours, and the more often you return to it, the more you begin to find yourself again. There's a phrase that has stayed with me for years. What you're searching for out there is waiting for you in here. And every time I forget that, life finds a way to remind me. Sometimes through an unexpected silence, other times through a discomfort that just won't go away. But deep down, it's always the same invitation. Come back to yourself. Return to what is truly yours, the part that doesn't need approval or results. Because it's there, in your most intimate silence, that you'll find what you've been chasing in the world. Clarity, peace, meaning. And only you can give yourself that. The question is, can you truly listen? Can you give yourself that time? Because mental clarity doesn't come in a rush. It doesn't show up when you force it. It comes when you allow it. When you slow down, even for just a few minutes. When you choose to be present, even in the middle of chaos. Clarity is like water. The more you stir it, the murkier it gets. But if you stop, it settles. It clears. And in that stillness, everything begins to make sense. Not because the world changed, but because you changed the way you see it. Sometimes that's all it takes. A pause with intention. I know the world keeps saying the opposite, that you need to rush, produce, deliver, always stay ahead. But what if, just for a moment, you chose to go the other way? What if your greatest act of courage today was to pause, to stop pressuring yourself so much, to stop trying to keep up with a pace that isn't yours? Because living isn't always about speeding up. Sometimes it's about taking a deep breath, looking around and realizing you're already on the path. And maybe slowing down is exactly what's been missing for you to finally feel at peace with yourself. And what if, in the middle of all this rushing around, what you truly needed was just a moment for yourself? A moment with no notifications, no obligations, no one watching you, just you, with you. Because sometimes all we really need is a quiet pause to ask ourselves honestly, what do I truly need right now? Not trying to find the perfect answer, just to listen, just to feel. And in that simple act of asking with honesty, something inside you starts to shift, starts to breathe in a different way, and that alone already begins to change everything. The clarity you're looking for might arrive in a sigh, in a quiet moment before sleep, in a thought that shows up out of nowhere while you're doing the dishes. It doesn't need a scheduled time or a special setting. Sometimes it shows up when you stop trying so hard to figure everything out, when you soften your chest and simply allow things to be, even for a moment. And in that moment, small, almost invisible, something shifts. Not because the world changed, but because you looked inward with more presence. And that look, that's where real transformation begins. And I know it's not always beautiful. Sometimes, getting to know yourself hurts, because you end up bumping into old wounds, into parts of your story you'd rather forget. But there's something deeply beautiful in that too. Because looking at those parts with compassion is an act of courage. It's saying to yourself, I deserve to be whole, even with my scars. Self-knowledge isn't a journey toward perfection. It's a journey toward acceptance, toward recognizing that there's beauty even in the parts that broke, and that precisely because they broke, they now understand the value of being rebuilt. That's not weakness. That's true strength. But even in those hard moments, something valuable is happening, because every time you face yourself with honesty, you free yourself a little more. It's like each truth you embrace makes room for more lightness, more authenticity, more presence. And the most beautiful part is that the more you know yourself, the less you feel the need to prove anything to anyone. You start walking lighter, more grounded, with your feet on the earth and your heart a little less burdened. And that doesn't mean the pain disappears, but it no longer controls you, because now the one in charge is you. There's no such thing as mental clarity without acceptance, and accepting doesn't mean settling or giving up. It simply means looking at yourself with more kindness, realizing that you are made of both light and shadow, of wins and stumbles. It's about recognizing that everything you've lived through has shaped who you are, and even your mistakes carry wisdom. When you accept your story, it stops holding you back and starts setting you free. Because only when you embrace your whole self can true transformation begin. And real transformation doesn't come from rejection, it comes from self-compassion. And the most beautiful part is, it doesn't require anything grand. Sometimes it all starts with a simple gesture, a notebook where you write down how you feel, a cup of coffee enjoyed in silence, a song that stirs something deep inside you, small rituals that, when done with presence, become shelter. You don't need the perfect moment or all the answers. You just need the willingness to listen to yourself more often. And the more you do that, the more connected you become with yourself. And believe me, that kind of intimacy changes everything. Because when you truly know yourself, you learn how to truly care for yourself. I've felt alone while trying to understand who I was. I used to think no one would truly get me, that maybe what was going on inside me was just too complicated to explain. But little by little I realized that the more I listened to myself, the more whole I began to feel. Not because I found quick answers, but because I was building a connection with myself. A kind of inner friendship, like I had finally stopped fighting with myself. And that peace, even if quiet, starts to change everything. Because when you embrace yourself, loneliness doesn't feel so heavy anymore. And if I'm able to share all this with you today, it's because I'm still walking that path. I'm not speaking as someone who has it all figured out, but as someone who chose to keep going, even without knowing exactly where it leads. I've learned to respect my own processes, my timing, my pauses, and I've realized that the most important thing isn't having all the answers, it's being willing to ask the right questions. That sincere curiosity about yourself, that desire to explore who you are, even slowly, because every step, no matter how small, brings you closer to yourself, and that reunion is what truly matters. There's one question I carry with me that really helps on days when everything feels confusing. Does this bring me closer to myself, or pull me further away? It's a simple question, but a powerful one, because it doesn't require deep analysis, just honesty. It invites you to look more mindfully at what you're doing, feeling, or allowing. And when you start asking this in your daily life, you begin to see that many choices that seemed small actually define how much you're respecting yourself. And the truth is, living with clarity isn't about controlling everything. It's about living with awareness. If this video helped you feel a little closer to yourself, share it with someone who might need this reminder too. Sometimes a simple conversation like this can light up corners we've forgotten. And if you'd like to keep walking this path of self-discovery with us, subscribe to the channel. This space belongs to you too. With each video, the goal is to build, together, a lighter, more mindful, and more truthful journey. Because the more people awaken, the more the world changes, from the inside out. Thank you for being here, truly. See you in the next one.